Thank you. Thank you, Representative Moser. Thank you, Chairman Fisher, and all those that have given us the opportunity, me specifically, the opportunity to speak on this. I was asked right outside the room before we came in here why this mattered to me, why I would take it upon myself to come in and present. And I will tell you the genesis of this has come from a lot of different sources, but there was one thing that I wanted to share with you as a group. I met shortly after having been elected as governor with a group of other governors, Democrat governors, Republican governors from all over the country. And there was a discussion on this exact topic. And the short version of a long conversation was that ultimately it was decided among governors that a letter should be written stating that we were in opposition to this growing epidemic of opioid addiction. At which point I really was struck by the fact that that seemed, well, is there anyone for it? And I was pretty sure there wasn't. And I thought, while it's good to write letters, and I do appreciate the sentiment behind that, it was what was then immediately said afterwards that really struck a chord with me. And that was the fact that immediately after that, another governor said, yeah, that would be a good idea. It's been several years since we wrote that. Remember, 3 or 4 years ago, we wrote a similar letter. And I thought to myself, this is why we are not fixing the problem. If, in fact, we simply write letter after letter, if we all give lip service to the fact that this is a problem when we want it addressed, nothing's going to be changed. In addition to the numbers that you have just heard and others that you'll hear from those that follow me, what's important for us in this room and in this body and in this town and in this Commonwealth to understand is that the degree of addiction is so much heavier in Kentucky that of those overdoses that happen every night in this state and around this country, we are twice the rate of the national average. Twice the rate of the national average. So while it's a problem for everyone, it's a bigger problem for us than for most. We're third highest, but double the average. This has got to be addressed. So why am I here? I'm here because until we are honest about it, until we have a frank conversation as it relates to everything from the production of it, to the prescription of it, to the prosecution of it, to the dissemination of it, to the fill in the blank of it being opioids, we're not going to fix the problem. We're not going to be serious about it. And this can't be a function of laying blame and pointing fingers and trying to throw any particular entity under the bus. With rare instance, and that being the people who are intentional drug dealers, and that will be spoken about as this bill is openly detailed. With the exception of that group, most of the people who have been complicit in this didn't start out trying to be complicit in something that has been so crippling to our nation and to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. But leadership does come by example. Not only from my seat, but from each of your respective seats and from this committee. And it is our responsibility to fix this because it knows no boundaries. It knows no political party. It knows no socioeconomic, barrier. The reality is this addiction is everywhere. And this is a highly, highly addictive drug, opioids. And now that we see these increasing numbers of synthetics, the fentanyls and the carfentanyls, and you'll hear discussion about how we are going to make it more punitive to deal in things that, frankly, when the earlier versions of these bills were written, didn't even exist or were certainly on no one's radar screen. So we're going to be specific. We're going to be as specific as anybody anywhere in America about what's on the streets right now and the cost that it's coming at our society, the cost to us. But the one thing I want to be clear is, again, I want to hammer those that are doing this on purpose. The one thing I want to remind us is of the fact that it doesn't matter, the funnel of addiction is this, and it's getting wider, as has been noted, 21% more than a year before in terms of overdoses. This funnel is getting wider. There is no amount of money, there are no amount of government programs, there are no amount of rehab programs, there are no amount of volunteers that are going to be able to handle at the bottom of the funnel the ability to fix this if we don't shrink the size of the top of the funnel. If we don't start to shrink that or close it off, there is no amount of money to fix everything at the bottom of the funnel. So what this bill does, House Bill 333, and I tip my hat to Representative Moser and so many others, and her work with KMA and so many others, who have truly been working to come up with solutions, and the doctors and others that will follow me that you'll hear from. Please give them your ear. Because these are people on the front lines who understand what's at stake. If we don't close that top of the funnel, we're done. We cannot fix this problem. We've got to make it harder to get addicted. And one of the most operative things you will see in here is, in a question I want us to ask ourselves, is why, when we know that something is as highly addictive as opioids, where 85% of all prescriptions in the world are prescribed in the United States of America, There's 200 and some countries. There's pain in the rest of those countries too. 85% of opioids are prescribed in America. And so it's important for us to understand, if that is the case, why is it that we are taking something so highly addictive and sending it home in volumes that people can become addicted to, where they can essentially self-medicate if they choose intentionally or otherwise to disregard what they were instructed to do? Why are we sending such volumes of this home to fall into their hands and or other people's hands? And you will see things like that. You will see things like punitive damages being or charges being brought against people, things being treated as Class C and Class B felonies that previously weren't. And I ask for your serious consideration of this. We don't have the luxury of being able to pretend this doesn't exist. We're 1 degree of separation away from this if we're honest about it. There's not one person in this room that isn't 1 degree of separation away from somebody who is addicted to opioids. Not one of us. And this is something that Kentucky has a chance to lead on. I think we have a moral obligation to, for our own people, but frankly, for the fact that nobody else in America is taking it as seriously as with this bill and others that are going to come behind it you'll hear about that deal with rehabilitation and treatment. Nobody else in America has the ability to be the leader on this like Kentucky does. And so I'm grateful to you, and I appreciate your consideration of this. And let us make it harder for our people to be addicted than it is for them to become addicted in other places. And let us also, in doing this, hold other states to this example and encourage them to copy it and make it tougher still in their respective states. There's no pride of ownership in this. We want everybody to be as restrictive of this to make the top end of that funnel as small as possible. That's all we're asking of. That's what I'm asking of you. I'm grateful to each and every one of you for your consideration of this. But let's nip this in the bud. Talk is cheap. We've talked a lot. We've studied a lot. We've blue panel ribboned enough. It's time for us to make some very definitive decisions as it relates to legislation. So thank you very, very much.